Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. Today I was joined by none other than Andy Schectman for a CSE podcast, VRIC Edition 2025. Andy Schectman is President and CEO of Miles Franklin. Miles Franklin was founded by David and Andrew Schectman. Their vision was to offer a wide variety of bullion and numismatic products, extensive broker expertise, and fair pricing. Unlike traditional coin dealers, Miles Franklin is both a full-service company and low-overhead discount broker. They believe that fair pricing plus extensive client education and support can and should exist hand in hand. Andy has quite the following online and is seen quite often at events like VRIC. We had a great talk today about silver, gold, cryptocurrency, and even the Trump inauguration. I am very lucky to be joined by none other than Andy Schectman. He is the President and CEO of Miles Franklin. You're an advisory firm in the U.S., right?
Precious metals firm in the U.S.
Precious metals firm in the U.S. A very successful one at that. And it certainly is not your first day on the job. You've been doing this a very long time. And you join us every year, I think, at VRIC and provide your insights on the market. Is that right?
I do. We've been doing this now for 35 years, which kind of blows me away. It's been a long time, and I've been at VRIC now for 6 straight years. So
wow.
I wouldn't miss it. Certainly, it's always on the list of must attend, and I think it's as good or better of a speaker lineup than any of the shows I've ever been associated with constantly, year over year. Seems to even get better.
That's right. Well, Cambridge, they do an amazing job at bringing in all of the expertise. I do love the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference because of the timing. I feel like we can all start the year and really get your insights and the experts' insights as we approach the year and how we're going to approach the resource sector. So we're also having this conversation on an interesting day. It is the official inauguration of President-elect Trump. He is the 47th elect president in the United States of America. So we're going to talk about that. But before we go there, what I'd love to hear about is your thoughts on gold. You've been talking about gold a lot lately and how the federal banks are purchasing lots of it. What are your thoughts on the gold market right now?
Yeah, the central banks have been buying it at a level the world has never seen. The last 2 months of last year, their numbers had doubled the 12-month moving average. Really, for the past 4 years or so, the amount of gold that the central banks have been purchasing is off the charts. If we go back 5 years, we see gold was reclassified the world's only other tier 1 asset by the Bank of International Settlements. And it's a point that isn't hammered home enough. The most powerful bank on the planet says, by the way, gold is now on par with U.S. treasuries and U.S. dollars. And at the same time, we see countries like China, as an example, that have sold $250 billion worth of their treasuries. At the same time, they've purchased over 1,000 metric tons of gold. It's a situation that is becoming very, very dynamic, and that is that the central banks, I think, look at gold, which has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury with no counterparty risk, is perhaps a better way of holding reserves than in treasuries, which can be weaponized and inflated and even ultimately defaulted upon. So to me, the actions of the most well-informed traders in the world, and I focus more on their influence and on their information than on their wealth. They're the wealthiest traders on the planet, but they know the playbook. And to see them accumulating and repatriating, that's another big point. Over 40 central banks have brought their gold home from the primary trading hubs, the Bank of England and the New York Fed, which would give direct access to the LBMA or to the COMEX. So they leave it there. Rule of law, safety, etc. That's all been usurped with wanting to have it in our own possession. So reclassified by the biggest bank in the world, the most influential, massively accumulated by all the central banks, and repatriated by them at the same time speaks to a bigger agenda, one that I think gold will be front and center with as we move on through whatever comes next.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that's interesting in this maneuver is that gold is obviously at an all-time high. We're not necessarily, typically we'll see when gold reaches these prices, we see the trickle-down effect of a flow of capital into the more junior speculative markets. I don't know if we've seen that yet. Can you talk to why that hasn't happened, and will it?
Yeah, it will. And first of all, an all-time high, granted, I give it to you, yes, but we don't know what real price discovery is when you have the Western central banks and by extension, the commercial banks that are for a very long time suppressed gold and silver, insanely, where, as an example, they are the number 1 and 2 most heavily shorted items on the COMEX market, concentrated short by a handful of big commercial banks. And there's a whole litany of reasons, and we don't need to go into the manipulation, simply to say it's unquestionable, and it's no longer fringe theory. JP Morgan paid a $920 million fine for doing just that, and they should have been prosecuted for a whole lot more, but we'll save that for another day. But my point to you is that gold appreciated by 30% last year. It outperformed just about everything with the exception of cryptocurrencies, which I'll get to in a moment. But look, it's doubled the performance of the 10-year Treasury for 25 years. It's outpaced the S&P 500 over the same period, 9.9 versus 9.6, and that 9.6 is with dividends reinvested. My mentor, Richard Russell, said if you made 7% a year, you're a rock star. We live at a period of time where instant gratification is not fast enough for a lot of the public, and a 30% return, which Richard would say is 4 times what a rock star would get back when valuations were normal, right now doesn't get noticed. And you have a lot of people who are chasing this risk-on trade, the Apple, the Nvidia, the Bitcoin, the fast return, and it's very dangerous. And so that's why it hasn't been noticed yet. Rick Rule over at the show, who's a very good friend of mine, will tell you that you take the entire matrix, financial matrix of the West, and the investment in gold and gold-related equities, whether it be physical gold or mining shares, the allocation from Joe and Jane Sixpack to the Harvard Endowment Fund is less than 0.5%. So it is unnoticed yet. And when you talk about value, that's where value is. It's not in the overcrowded trades. It's in the place that is screaming of value with little or no understanding by the mainstream. And that's a function of where we are right now. So from a standpoint of contrarian and value, I don't think there's a better place to be than in physical metals and a portfolio of mining shares, from junior to exploration to junior to mid-cap to producing and to royalty. It's where the value is, period, in my mind.
On the note of investing kind of in the junior exploration space, is there any important due diligence processes or any notes when you're looking at a company that is in the early stage that is important for you to make the decision to invest in?
That's something I will tell you I have selfishly relied on others for. I have a very good relationship with Rick and with the folks at Sprott who have helped me analyze those stocks, because quite frankly, it's much easier for me to look at a major producer or a royalty company than it is to understand the benefits of a junior or an exploration. And I've been very lucky with some exploration stocks and some juniors. In fact, my first experience, just to give people an understanding of where you can find value, how the value can be life-changing. I was 21 years old, 1991 maybe. And I had a client, and God rest his soul, his name was Jerry Tomchek, and Jerry's no longer with us. He was a geologist, and he said to me, how much money do you have? I said, I don't know, I have $9,000 in an IRA. He said, put it all into Western Copper. Okay, Jerry. He said, trust me, I'm a geologist, trust me. Okay, Jerry, fine. Put $9,000 into Western Copper at, I don't know, just a couple of pennies a share. It changed its name very shortly after to Western Silver. And then Western Silver got bought shortly after that by Glamis Gold Company, who then got bought by Gold Corp. And I turned $9,000 into almost $700,000 as a very young man. Now, granted, I haven't had many experiences, anything like that.
That's not a daily.
No, it's not. But it does show the power of being in the right stock. Yeah. And again, I'm the wrong person to ask to what metrics, but I would assume that's something you folks do. That's something that Rick has helped me with, finding the right information. Yeah. Not only who's behind it, the people, which to me it seems to be one of the most important things. Rick always talks about being partnering with serially successful people who have had luck or success rather along the way. To me, I would guess would probably be the most important thing, and then the balance sheet and the land and all that kind of stuff. But it can be life-changing if you hit it Right, that's for sure.
I mean, I think that these forums that we all get together at are so critical right now because there's a lot of investors that are educating themselves on various forums such as social media and other forums where there's maybe not necessarily the backing behind, a real kind of the media and some fake news. But also they are investing and making their own investment decisions. They are doing it on discount brokerage accounts. So I think that the opportunity to get together with the experts has become more important than ever. We used to rely a lot on the brokerage community to provide us with all of that information. But now there's a lot of people out there that are doing it on their own. So very much appreciate when we can all get together, within these.
Well, you know what you said is really key because you go out to dinner with a bunch of these guys, like the Rick Rules, like the Bill Bonners, like the Doug Caseys.
I would go to that dinner.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's crazy because I just sit there and try and not say a word and absorb as much as I can, and you quickly realize one thing, and that is it's as much what you know in this industry as it is who you know.
Right.
And if you know the right people who know the right stuff, you get the right information. And to do juniors and resource stocks on your own is very difficult.
Yes,
and if you, I think, understand that and try to associate with those people who have had great success, that would be the biggest piece of advice I could give as someone who has been a fly on the wall listening to these guys talk in awe as it pertains to this subject specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, on the note of gold and investing in the resource sector, I want your thoughts on cryptocurrency because I know that you talk quite often about it and where you think it's headed. What do you think about it and the space?
Well, I think first, I own a metals company, so my allegiance is to, and always has been, to something I can touch and feel and hold. I think it's naive to be closed-minded and be married to your own story so much that you don't at least listen to and explore. I still find the whole concept of cryptocurrency something that is difficult for me to wrap my head around, albeit because I'm open-minded. I've dipped my toe into the water. I think more appropriately as it pertains to gold and crypto, I would say gold and blockchain. I have said for 4 years now that there will be a marriage, I believe, between gold, which is what? The only other tier 1 reserve asset that who's been buying? The most powerful people in the world, the central banks, and doing what with it? Bringing it home. You look at the unit settlement token as an example from the BRICS, who Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, the head of the new development bank, said, we have agreed in principle to a new settlement token for the BRICS nations called the unit.
Okay.
Backed 40% by gold, deliverable to those countries who want to take it.
Wow.
That to me is a marriage between blockchain technology and gold. Judy Shelton, I had on my show recently, who was Trump's nominee for the head of the Federal Reserve in 2016, although she wasn't confirmed. I do believe she will be on the Board of Governors this time around as a Federal Reserve. She's advocating for 50-year treasuries pegged to gold. And she then said to me that it is her hope that she would see a rise of stable coins that would come out backed on or based on the 50-year treasury, which is redeemable in gold. So I think that when we talk about the two, I think there will be a marriage between the two. But the message that I gave yesterday, because there are people who I have great respect for at the show, like Mark Moss, who has had tremendous success with Bitcoin. It's because of him that I started buying a little bit every 2 weeks. A year ago at this show was $40,000. And he says, put a little bit in because I've been buying gold every 2 weeks for 35 years.
Wow.
I've never missed a 2-week period of buying gold or silver. A promise I made my father when we started our company in 1989. I'll buy it every 2 weeks. And I have. I've honored my word, even though I own the company. It's the best gift he's ever given me. Anyone's ever given me.
Isn't that the best advice? Invest often.
To learn the laws of compounding.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, I still think like I'm 19, right?
Yeah.
I'm not, but your mind doesn't really change. And all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, holy crap, how did I get to be 54? The laws of compounding and paying yourself first are extraordinary.
That's right.
But what I said about Bitcoin is basically, and crypto, is that our two communities go into the door for the same reason, and much of the same reason, in that we understand what's happening to the currency, to the mismanagement of monetary and fiscal policy.
Right.
To the fact that 1 trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago, and we have in essence, 200 trillion in debt, 36 on the balance sheet, and Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security.
Terrifying numbers.
So the understanding of that is huge.
Yeah.
We go into the door, but one camp goes the way towards profit and the other goes towards preservation. So my message is, number one, we should be complementary, not divisive, and at each other's throats all the time saying, well, this is dumb or that's dumb. And I think that the way that you win is by taking the profits that you can make, incredibly large profits in crypto, and putting it into sound money so that you're hedging your bet in a non-dollar denominated asset. A very, very big lesson I learned a long time ago was not to be broadly diversified, because you end up buying asset classes that are, some go up, some go down, some go sideways. That's cop-out. Instead, identify the primary trend of the market. In other words, which way does the river flow? If you believe it is of a dollar that is in trouble, then broadly diversify within that trend. Cryptocurrencies, precious metals, mining shares, ag, whether it be farmland or agricultural ETF, oil and gas.
Yeah.
You are broadly diversified within the primary trend. You have a much more solid base, and there's no reason to
I really like that
infighting.
thesis.
You know,
Yeah.
it's better just to be, we're stronger
Yeah.
and get the message out to more people if we're unified rather than at each other's throats.
We're taught in the investment community that a broadly diversified portfolio is kind of the key to hedging it all. But I think there's a lot of value in what you just said, that being too broadly diversified or without somebody managing, you know, kind of, if you're just buying funds that are broadly diversified, it doesn't necessarily bring you any of the value that
You're the best of the worst.
right? Absolutely.
Or the worst of the best.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Okay, on that note, you did mention Trump, and I want to talk about this. He is inaugurated today as we're having this conversation, and he has talked, and I don't want to say the word threaten, but he has talked about imposing tariffs on Canadian exports. Can you talk about what you think? We're not sure. At this point, he hasn't said for sure if this will be happening. But if it does happen, do you have any forecast on what you think this will do as far as potential trade wars or affecting the markets on either side of the border?
But they will definitely result in trade wars. They will definitely result in higher prices for Americans. It doesn't ever get passed on, or really it always gets passed on to the end user. I'm less concerned about tariffs between Canada and the United States. Those will get worked out, I think. I think they'll work something up. But I'm more concerned about his sanctions that masquerading as a tariff to, like, the BRICS nations into China, saying if you don't do this, or if you do this, then this. That's not a tariff. A tariff is meant to protect your manufacturing. And if it really, truly is unfair, where one country is not is able to freely sell and the other one isn't, then there has to be, if it affects your manufacturing in the United States, then tariffs are fine. I think it's actually fair. But if it's done in the form of a threat, that's more of the same crap that has inspired the BRICS, and that is sanctions that are, you know, coercive, instead of extending an olive branch and say, look, this is a new administration, this is we're doing it, going to do things the right way.
Yeah.
Let's find a way to resolve these inequities. And I don't love the way that the tariffs are coming across in a threatening way, but there is inequities that should be worked out. It will harm the United States consumer more than it will Canada, more than it will Mexico, and much more than it will all of the countries that he's threatening it with, which will ultimately lead to a trade war, which will ultimately lead to higher prices, inflation, and who knows, maybe even more crystallization of countries rallying and pushing back against the U.S. dollar hegemony.
Do you think there's any direct relation between what could potentially happen with that and the resource sector?
Well, yeah, actually I do, as a matter of fact, because in particular he's talking about tariffs on gold and silver. So, you know, I don't know how that would impact the resource sector, but physical gold that would be moved from Canada to the United States, in essence, he's talking about a 20% tariff on. I mean, that's a little scary.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it would get in
from
the Canadian mining companies, unless there was a workaround some way. I have no idea.
Right.
That's just thinking outside the box. And I think about that because, you know, for example, we have a Canadian storage program with a lot of people's gold held in Canada. Does that mean if they try to bring it back into the United States, it will be tariffed?
Right.
I'm not sure. All I'm simply saying is that, yes, tariffs would have a profound effect on everything. And if indeed it is pulling, I don't know if the distinction, if you're pulling gold out of the ground and then having it refined, for example, in
Right.
New York, would that be
Considered.
yes, or
Right.
if it's refined at the Royal Canadian Mint and then sent to New York
Yeah.
to be placed in the form of 100-ounce gold bars on the COMEX, would that be considered tariffable? I don't know.
Yeah.
If it is, sure, it would have a big effect.
Well, I think what you're saying essentially is that what it is creating is a lot of uncertainty, which the markets do not
Right.
like.
Yeah, there is a great deal. He's a wild card across the board.
He's a bit of a wild card. So as far as uncertainty and causing a bit more chaos perhaps in the market, uncertainty and chaos do also create opportunity. So to end off, is there anything going into 2025 that you think that there is opportunity for us as we look at the resource sector as a place to invest?
Yeah, I mean, to me, silver, from an asymmetrical risk-reward position, there's nothing like it.
Okay.
Silver, to me, is the most undervalued asset.
I like silver.
Yeah, well, to me, it's the most undervalued asset on the planet,
Yeah.
and by extension, so too would be the silver equities. It's coming out of the ground geologically. Keith Newmeyer and I talk about this all the time. It's coming out of the ground right now at a geologic ratio of 7-to-1. In other words, every 1 ounce of gold, there's 7 ounces of silver. For 5,000 years, it was 16-to-1. And the reason that's depleting is that silver is found in nature in a form called epithermal. Like your skin is epidermis, epithermal means it's right at the surface. So the big deposits were found forever ago. That's why there's only a handful of silver mining companies and a whole bunch of gold mining companies, because there just isn't the big deposits. In fact, of all of the silver that was mined last year, call it 850 million ounces, roughly only 20 to 25%, under 200 million, came from companies that mine silver. The rest of it were other companies mining copper or gold and say, oh, look, we found some silver.
They found it.
Byproduct.
That's incredible.
So it's depleting, right? And with all of that being said, it was at 16-to-1 since the beginning of time. Even Isaac Newton, in developing the relationship for the mint, used 16-to-1.
Yeah.
It's now priced at 85-to-1, and this is because of the stupidity of 8 commercial banks shorting the price of silver on COMEX and the LBMA. For what reason? That's a whole different subject, but I think it has a lot to do with silver's role in the military, the military-industrial complex, where 3 years ago I gave a speech here and said there's 500 ounces of silver in a Tomahawk missile. And a gentleman comes up to me, and he's been here every year, including this year, since, as a consultant for the DoD, says, you're right, I developed it. I actually helped build the Tomahawk cruise missile. All of these high-tech weaponry has silver in it. Why else would you have 8 Western banks that are shorting to the degree of the largest concentrated short position in any commodity ever traded in the history of the COMEX, and between 4 and 6 billion ounces short on the LBMA, of which 90+% is paper? It's an existential threat to some of these commercial banks. So from my view, there are very few things when you use the word asymmetrical, meaning lowest downside, highest upside, of any asset I've ever seen in my 35-year career in finance. It's in silver, period. Okay. And whether it be physical or finding the right mining share or royalty company like Silver Wheaton, not financial advice, but I will tell you that, to me, if I were advising my family, that's exactly what I would tell them to do.
Okay, I love that. Andy, thank you so much for taking the time out of a busy schedule and joining us today.
Great.
You know, at the CSE, we really want to educate as much. There's a lot of people wanting to break into the resource sector and learn how to invest, but there's a lot to learn. So really appreciate people like you giving us your time. And I hope you have a wonderful few days on Whistler Mountain.
I do as well. Thank you for having me. It was great, and we'll do it again next year.
Sounds great. Thanks, Andy.
You got it.